Protesters have been camped out outside DPD headquarters here for 10 days now. Their mission is what is painted right here in the street in large letters to defund the police.
It's been painted that way since June of 2020, when almost nightly protests rocked Durham in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd.
You know, what's interesting is that when that defund sign went up, Durham was being heralded and congratulated for having one of the best responses to protest in the country at that time. We didn't have any major vandalism of our downtown area. We didn't make mass arrests. There weren't, nightstick wielding cops cracking skulls in our downtown area. And we had some large protests. And that police department did that while defund was on the ground in front of them.
That's Mark Anthony Middleton, Durham City Council member, talking about the way the Durham Police Department conducted itself in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Here's Police Chief Patrice Andrews.
I am proud of the officers, coming to work because they love Durham. And that's a direct quote. I love Durham. Why? There's nowhere else but Durham for me. I love Durham. I love this community. I just want the community to love me back, And that's a very touching thing for officers, to want to be accepted by those that they would lay down their life for.
Chief Andrews was the focus of the first episode of this podcast companion series to the WRAL-TV documentary Durham Under Fire. The doc is an exploration of gun violence in Durham, and if you haven't seen it, make sure you check it out at WRALdocumentary.com and on WRAL's YouTube page. But today's episode is not about elected or appointed city officials. It's about two police officers who grew up in Durham and the complexities of their work as law enforcement officers and community members. They both know people they grew up with who ended up being killed by gun violence. I'll talk with them about how their experiences shape how they show up for work, how they see neighborhoods through the glass of their patrol cars, how they talk to people on the street, how they try to make a difference in their very interconnected communities, and the barriers to making that happen. I'm WRAL investigative reporter Cristin Severance, and this is part 2 of the Durham Under Fire companion podcast.
You guys ready?
I'm ready.
We're ready.
All right.
That's me and WRAL photographer Jay Jennings on another ride-along with the Durham Police.
All right, I'm Corporal Jermaine Clark, assigned to the gang unit, which is housed within the Organized Crime Division of the Durham Police Department.
And so, as on the gang unit, with such an increase in gun violence, what has it been like doing your job this last year?
It's challenging at times because, our guys will come in and they'll work extremely hard, very thorough, very diligent in their efforts. They make multiple arrests, may get, 15 to 20 guns seized in a month, which is pretty good. But when you're doing that type of work and you still turn around and there's still homicide after homicide, shooting after shooting, it's challenging, But one thing about it is that, our command staff, they do a tremendous job in relaying that the efforts are definitely not unnoticed. And, that feedback from them, as well as, the citizens, the community, citizens are saying openly, hey, we need help, and so when we're out there, they're greeting the guys, they're assisting the guys. It makes a difference. So even though it's a challenge that keeps going and going like a revolving door, it's still been productive. The guys are still being motivated.
So are most of these shootings gang related, would you say?
So that's a twofold. There are incidents that we know are gang related, but because we know and being able to prove, sometimes it's not always the same. It's not as simple as saying that, hey, 2 gang members are involved in an incident. You can get robberies and stuff that take place, and although it's a gang member that's a participant, it's not specifically a gang-related incident, So.
But do you feel like the narrative out there is the shootings in Durham are gang-related?
For certain. There is a tremendous amount of gang activity that takes place in this city, without a doubt. This city is pretty much like a lot of other cities that you see across the country that have gang violence.
Now, according to Jim Stite, the gang reduction strategy manager for the city and county, Durham is not so different from other cities in its rates of gang violence. One thing that sets it apart, though, is the age of gang members. Stite said they're seeing kids younger than 12 years old getting involved. He said the reasons vary. A sibling or family member might be in a gang, or maybe they live somewhere with a gang influence. Corporal Clark says he thinks gang life has been embraced by society in a new way. And Clark talked about social media, how shootings get publicized almost immediately, instead of the information taking a few hours or even days to trickle out. So retaliatory violence can sometimes happen moments later. Social media posts can be used by gang members to track down rival gang members, again, leading to more violence. We'll explore some of the complex circumstances that lead some to gang life in an upcoming episode. Clark is quick to point out that being in a gang is not a crime and that there's value in communicating with gang members.
Every time we encounter a gang member, we're encouraged to do field contacts and stuff like that to document it. But from a personal standpoint, if you meet a guy today that's a gang member, and you meet him on good terms, then you're more likely to have a good conversation. We don't want our interactions with citizens to always be negative interactions. I don't want every time I see you is to be, taking you to jail. If I see you out and about in the community, see you at a gas station or something, and I say what's up and we can talk about anything, that goes a long ways, because what happens is that down the road, if you do encounter that person on the other side, then they're more likely to be willing to at least cooperate with you. Not necessarily like provide information and stuff, but they won't give you as hard of a time. They'll respect the fact that you have a job to do. And, it's a give and take thing. You guys fill out injunction?
Now to pilot favor.
All right, 10-4. We're coming your way.
So as someone who grew up here, so you said you were in the inner city, but did you say it was the projects? Was it considered low-income housing?
Definitely considered the projects.
Projects. Okay, so you grew up in the projects.
Mm-hmm.
So do you know people, I'm sure you know people, but do you ever run into a situation where you are called out and you know the victim or you know the victim's family?
Yes, that happens. It happens.
And what is that like?
So for me, it's not hard. In fact, a lot of times people breathe a sigh of relief when there's an officer on the scene that they know, that they grew up with, went to high school with, rode a school bus with, played basketball with, It provides a layer of relief for that person, because even in doing wrong, a lot of people they need comfort, and a person can know they're about to go to jail, but if they see somebody they know, they can ask them questions. They can lessen that burden, provide more of a mental health relief type of factor. There have been very limited instances where I've encountered someone I went to school with or grew up with in the projects, and it was negative. In fact, I can't think of any instances. And this is even guys that, went to prison, did substantial prison terms. They come home and I see them to this day. It's still, how are you? I'm proud of you. Glad you made it out. That type of thing.
But doesn't it hurt you to see them? Doesn't it hurt you your heart to see them?
Absolutely. I think one of the more difficult things is that, when you grow up in the projects, that's like your second family away from your family. You guys do everything together. Guys that taught me how to play football, guys that, we caught the school bus together, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. It's very sad and it's very disheartening. So what I tend to do with those guys is, if they're doing good, I tell them, hey, man, I'm proud of you, man. Made your comeback. You were down for a while, but now you're back. And I try to become a resource for them. If they need something, I'll tell them to reach out to me. They got a question about something about jobs or anything, and then I tell them too, if you're doing good and you're clean, then I'll advocate for you if you ever need a job or something like that,
And so do you have anyone in your life, friends or someone you knew who did die of gun violence?
Oh yeah, I have several friends that have, that have passed away, from homicides and stuff like that. And even now, believe it or not, there are times where, I've interacted with gang members and, significantly. Maybe an arrest, doing an arrest is one of the more, personal times. You take somebody to jail, they're in your custody, have conversations, you get to know them in that ride or that encounter, and you try to encourage them, hey, leave the streets alone, do something different. Look at the age difference, you say, hey, you could have been my little brother or something. So these guys that we develop relationships, then we go to crime scenes and they're dead. It kind of, even that, it hurts you, it sets you back, because it's like, wow, I just talked to this guy 2 months ago, bought this guy a cheeseburger, and then you see they're dead. So it always affects you, whether you know them 20 years ago or you know them 2 months ago,
Jermaine Clark of the Durham Police Department does not see things in stark contrasts or us versus them. He sees a whole community that's hurting and complicated.
So we'll try to catch up to this car.
All right, here's what I got to see it. We're going to get caught behind a bunch of cars. We'll try to get up there.
So basically, he called out a Chapter 20 violation. So we'll try to go investigate that Chapter 20, which is a motor vehicle offense.
Wait, what's a Chapter 20 violation?
So a Chapter 20 is a motor vehicle violation. So sometimes, if you see a vehicle that has like extremely dark tint, you can't have window tint below North Carolina threshold, right? And then outside of that, there are other indicators. If you look at...
Yeah, we're still a ways back because I had it called out, but we're going to try. I don't have eyes on it yet.
So in this case, they didn't observe a hand-to-hand transaction, but it was something else that stood out about their car, which prompted them to let us know this Chapter 20. We need to check it out. All right. So this car is not going to stop for us. It doesn't look like it. Maybe it will. We shall see. So this is going to be a refusal to stop. So we got a very loose chase policy. So we can't chase vehicles just for anything. So at this point in time...
Stop sign going right on that light.
So the officer get on police A and call it out as a refusal to stop.
It's using first signal at least. It's going left on to 4 miles now. All right, guys, if it's running, don't chase it.
So this was an interesting moment in the ride-along. I thought the police officer who called out that Chapter 20 would just continue to follow until that person pulled over. But I learned it's just not that simple.
But why? So what happened? So you went after him, but then you have to just let him go?
Yes. So the city of Durham and most law enforcement jurisdictions have very restricted chase policies, right? And so our policy is one that says that you can't chase a vehicle unless that vehicle is a suspect vehicle of a violent crime that just occurred. So now, let's say, for instance, that vehicle had just committed an aggravated assault, like shot at multiple people, or if that vehicle was just carjacked, meaning armed robbery of a vehicle, essentially, then we could chase it all day. But right now, we have a car. The only thing we have is Chapter 20, meaning they're violating motor vehicle laws. That's not enough from a liability standpoint to justify chasing that vehicle.
So, but if they didn't have something to hide, right, why would they not stop? So is that a frustrating, like, why is that policy in place as someone who's not in law enforcement?
So it's a necessary policy.
Oh, it is.
So if you think about it, if we chase that car and there's a gun in the car, right, then that's a win. But in the process of chasing that vehicle, let's say, for instance, it crashed at this intersection and kills 2 people. Is getting that one gun worth sacrificing 2 lives, right? So it's kind of like a risk reward. Like, again, if that person has committed a violent crime, like they just shot somebody, attempted to kill somebody, then you can articulate, if you don't stop them, then they're a threat to do it again. But right now, we don't know if we have a violent person in the car or not. And it's unfortunate because this happens to us a lot.
Killer, what were your numbers on Sherwood?
In a month where we seize 15 guns, we probably could seize 25 to 30 if every car stopped, But this is a perfect example of what happens. But we do have the vehicle license plate, right? So now the investigation continues. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the residence that the car is registered to, and we're going to see if that vehicle's there. We have a name, we have a residence. So even if, let's say, for instance, the registration's outdated or address hasn't changed, there are other law enforcement resources and tools we can tap into to get in contact with the registered owner.
Corporal Clark later told me, you don't always get the guns. Sometimes the guns get away. And his gut feeling was that there was a gun in the car that didn't stop. Another interesting part here, the driver of that car clearly knew about the no chase policy. The officer tried to pull the car over, the driver kept going and then just drove off. And some people I interviewed for the doc say that's happening way too often in Durham. People committing crimes know these policies, they know police are understaffed, and they're taking advantage. I had the chance to ride along with another officer during the making of the documentary. Darian Day grew up in Durham. His father was a captain with the Durham PD, and Day has been an officer with the force for 10 years.
I never liked bullies in school.
New message.
So I consider myself someone who can look after or speak up for the people that are being bullied. And that sort of corresponds with what I do now. I'm the voice of people who have no voice or little voice. That's why I do it.
And so what's it like now? I mean, how do you describe right now? What is it like being an officer in Durham? I mean, I can't imagine it's easy right now.
It's not easy. It's challenging at times, but it's also rewarding. Just going out into like our other trainings, and once you tell somebody, hey, I work in Durham, I'm an officer in Durham, just everybody understands like, okay, your job is tough, but you all do it well. So that's a very rewarding aspect to it. And believe it or not, most of the community does appreciate us, so I like it. I love it. I don't want to do anything else. People have asked all the time, are you going to find another career? Are you going to do something different? Absolutely not. This is it.
So how has it changed from when you started 10 years ago?
The main thing that has changed has been, especially ever since social media has sort of taken over, I see a lot more community distrust than I did 10 years ago. But we just have to adapt with how times are changing, how policing is changing, and come up with new ways to continue to do the same job.
Do you feel like you guys are doing that?
Oh, absolutely. We definitely are doing that. I had the privilege of being on our community engagement unit that was stood up a couple years ago. And that unit was dedicated to simply in our lower income areas, just being there and providing various services for the lower income residents of Durham. Not just police services, but they need mental services or medical services, being able to point them in the right direction and provide various resources to them.
And you think things like that make a difference? That's what police need to be doing?
That's not all we need to be doing, but it does help. I can say since being on that unit, in some of those lower income areas, we were able to bridge this gap that has sort of formed and build relationships. And we've actually have solved crimes based off of just that unit and those officers being able to relate and speak to certain people in those communities and get information from them. So that type of unit definitely helps. It's not all we need, but it definitely is a major part of what we need.
Corporal Day knows Durham and knows the pain some people living here experience.
One of my best friends was killed by gun violence in 2013, and so a lot of the gun violence, and people say you have no idea about, you don't know what it's like. I do know what it's like. Getting a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning telling you one of your best friends was just killed. So I definitely understand it. I definitely get it.
What happened with your friend?
We went to high school and college together, and he was at a party during our homecoming. So they were having a homecoming celebration, and I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly what transpired, but he was shot several times leaving that party. So it hits home every time I hear a shooting just occurred or a homicide has just occurred. It definitely hits home. So it means a lot for me to continue to do this job, because he's always been one of the big supporters of me doing this job. So being born and raised in Durham, the city I live in, and experiencing it firsthand, it definitely hits home when it comes to gun violence. So I ride with his, you probably didn't notice, but his keychain sits in my car all the time. So it's very symbolic for me.
And he was a big supporter of you doing this job?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, I mean, gun violence like that, I feel like there's like waves, like there's so many people impacted.
Yep. A lot of people think it stops with the actual victim who was shot, but it affects the entire community. It affects the entire community. So not even people who have no relation to the victim are impacted by it and have a reaction to it. So it's bigger than just one person in each incident. It's way bigger.
And so where are we right now?
So this is Bitwood Apartments, and it's one of our lower income areas. We have quite a few problems out of here every now and then. So I normally just ride by and show a little police presence, especially for the people who like us out here and want us out here. So that ride through could potentially prevent something from happening within the next hour, just because they know we're out, they know we're working, and we're paying attention to that neighborhood now.
Corporal Darian Day is touching on something really important here that many people I interviewed talk about: the importance of police officers being in the community before something happens instead of just being there after. Of course, there are plenty of people who want fewer police officers, not more.
While Durham police continue to deal with a surge in violence, tonight 2 local groups will call on city leaders to reduce the size of the police force.
2 groups, Durham for All and Durham Beyond Policing, are proposing the city council not fill vacant officer positions and instead hire unarmed mental health professionals to respond to some 911 calls.
Activist Skip Gibbs, who organized demonstrations in Durham, was struck by the city's new police headquarters right across the street from public housing.
That contrast made me angry. Let's take some of that money and put it somewhere where we're going to actually see a return and actually see something happen instead of just more uniforms, more guns.
Instead, WRAL Investigates found local communities holding the line on police budgets, even growing them.
And despite budget increases for the Durham PD, they've had a lot of trouble filling vacant positions. More on that in a few minutes. So back to Corporal Day talking to me about how Durham has changed since he joined the force a decade ago.
The changes in Durham since I've started are, for lack of better words, crazy. Our downtown has blossomed into something I never thought it would be. I remember starting off at 9 o'clock, downtown was a ghost town. There was no restaurants open, no bars open. There was no type of nightlife at all. Now, 9 o'clock, downtown is teeming with life. Bars, restaurants, the D-Pack. So Durham has changed dramatically, and every time I come to work, I see a new housing development going up somewhere. So we're a booming city. The boom is going to continue, and our districts are going to continue to get bigger. So the more officers we have to help answer, especially patrol-wise, to help answer these 911 calls, allows other officers to have that proactive approach and that preventative approach when it comes to violent crime versus being able to answer 911 calls all day and losing that preventative option for violent crime. We just need more officers. We need the help, and that's all.
And that's like where recruiting comes in?
That's where recruiting comes in.
We heard that a lot.
How important is, police and staffing and trying to recruit and retain officers?
Woo. That part, it hurts my heart.
That's Durham Mayor Elaine O'Neill.
I remember as a district court judge, I would be invited to Durham, take over in their auditorium for a graduation for police officers, and the auditorium would be packed. It would be standing room only. So a couple of months ago, we had a graduation. There were 7.
O'Neill notes that requirements to graduate are rigorous, and for good reason. Now, there have been recent raises for police officers, but Corporal Day says rookie officers may not even make enough money to afford living in Durham because of the skyrocketing housing costs. I posed the question to Durham Police Chief Patrice Andrews, who used to lead the police department in Morrisville, North Carolina. What are you going to do about this recruitment?
So we continue to, send our recruiters to job fairs. We've actually started going into the basic law enforcement training classes at the community colleges, which is something that we were not doing previous. I always say, yes, Durham has, one of the best training courses in the state of North Carolina, which is why other agencies see a Durham applicant and they're like, we want them, push them to the front of the line. I know because I did it in Morrisville. But we had to also say, okay, you know what? There's also some amazing candidates that are currently putting themselves through basic law enforcement training at our community colleges. So we've stretched out there, really identifying officers within our ranks that are that are veterans and that can really speak to what it is like to transition into this line of work, specifically from active duty service into service with Durham. We've got tremendous universities here. So our HBCUs, North Carolina Central University, Duke University, we've got, alumni from both of those institutions here. So it's getting them and saying, all right, you're going to go and recruit, because commonality draws people.
The Durham PD currently has 103 openings out of 537 positions. While they try to fill those positions, Chief Andrews will have to continue to make tough calls about how to allocate limited staff resources. For example, putting officers on targeted task forces working to get guns off the street or keep more officers on patrol.
It's frustrating because, on one hand, you see that making the sacrifice on patrol, we can get these guns and adopt more cases federally and help out, our gang unit and our other specialized drug units, right? But then I also see my patrol officers, and I feel like I have, just a responsibility to every last one of them. I feel like I have this responsibility to making sure that they are safe, that they are not running call to call to call to call and not eating and not, that they're being given that opportunity to decompress. So it's frustrating because I know it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg. One is intimately intertwined with the other. But it doesn't stop us from looking at, being creative. The thing about this is that you can be creative. There is no wrong way to a solution. The only wrong thing is if you're not willing to try it.
This has been episode 2 of the audio companion to the WRAL documentary, Durham Under Fire. Follow the doc team on social at WRAL Docs for updates. Remember, you can watch the doc on WRAL's YouTube page. Be sure to like and subscribe. You can find more episodes of the WRAL Doc Companion podcast in this feed, including the episode 1 ride-along with Police Chief Andrews when she responded to a shooting. Be sure to follow the show in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss future episodes. For more podcasts from WRAL News and Capital Broadcasting Company, go to WRAL.com and search podcast. This podcast was hosted and reported by me, Cristin Severance. Jay Jennings recorded the interviews, and Rachel McCarthy produced the episode. Mix by Mark Maximoff. Thanks for listening.